Hi, Aqua Roomers. It's time for chapter reading. So yesterday, Pa and Ma and Laura and Mary heard the scream in the middle of the night. It was really scary. Pa got out of bed, put his boots on, went outside, and nobody could figure out what had happened. So they were waiting for Pa to come back. And suddenly, fists pounded on the door. And Pa shouted, "Let me in! Quick, Caroline!" Ma opened the door and Pa slammed it quickly behind him. He was out of breath. He pushed back his cap and said, "Whew, I'm scared yet." "What was it, Charles?" said Ma. "A panther," Pa said. He had hurried as fast as he could to Mr. Scott's. When he got there, the house was dark and everything was quiet. Pa went all around the house, listening and looking with the lantern. He could not find a sign of anything wrong. So he felt like a fool to think he got up and got dressed in the middle of the night and walked 2 miles, all because he heard the wind howl. He did not want Mr. and Mrs. Scott to know about it, so he did not wake them up. He came home as fast as he could because the wind was bitter cold, and he was hurrying along the path where it went on the edge of the bluff when all of a sudden he heard that scream right under his feet. Oh my goodness. Do you remember that picture? Yes. See the panther up in the tree? And there's Pa with the lantern. Whew. That would be really, really scary. I tell you, my hair stood up till it lifted my cap, he told Laura. I lit out for the house like a scared rabbit. Where was that panther, Pa? She asked him. In a treetop, said Pa. In the top of that big cottonwood that grows along the bluffs. Pa, did it come after you? Laura asked. And he said, I don't know, Laura. Well, you're safe now, Charles, said Ma. Yes, and I'm glad of it. This is too dark a night to be out with panthers, Pa said. Now, Laura, where's my boot jack? Laura brought it to him. The boot jack was a thin oak slab with a notch in one end and a cleat across the middle of it. Laura laid it on the floor with the cleat down, and the cleat lifted up the notched end. Then Pa stood on it with one foot. He put the other foot into the notch, and the notch held the boot by the heel while Pa pulled his foot out. Then he pulled off his other boot the same way. The boots clung tightly, but they had to come off. So I'm going to show you a picture of a boot jack. So you see, it goes into the heel, and then Pa steps down, and it makes it easier for him to get his boots off. Yeah, I would say he needed that after being out for quite a while at night. Laura watched him do this, and then she asked, Would a panther carry off a little girl, Pa? Yes, Pa said, and kill her and eat her too. You and Mary must stay in the house till I shoot the panther. As soon as daylight comes, I will take my gun and go after him. All the next day, Pa hunted that panther, and he hunted the next day and the next day. He found the panther's tracks, and he found the hide and bones of an antelope that the panther had eaten, but he did not find the panther anywhere. The panther went swiftly through the treetops, where it left no tracks. Pa said he would not stop until he found that panther. We can't have panthers running around in a country where there are little girls. But he did not kill that panther, and he did stop hunting it. One day in the woods, he met an Indian. They stood in the wet, cold woods and looked at each other, and they could not talk because they did not know each other's words. But the Indian pointed to the panther's tracks, and he made motions to show Pa that he had killed the panther. He pointed to the treetops and to the ground to show that he had shot it out of the tree. And he motioned to the sky and the west and the east to say that he had killed it the day before. So that was all right. The panther was gone. Laura asked if the panther would carry off a little papoose. And Pa said yes. Probably that was why the Indians had killed the panther. Chapter 21. Can you believe we're already on chapter 21? Wow. Indian Jamboree. Winter ended at last. There was a softer note in the sound of the wind, and the bitter cold was gone. One day, Pa said he had seen a flock of wild geese flying north. It was time to take his furs to Independence. Ma said, "The Indians are so near." "They are perfectly friendly," said Pa. He often met Indians in the woods where he was hunting, and there was nothing to fear from the Indians. But Ma said no. Laura knew that Ma was afraid. "You must go, Charles," she said. "We must have a plow and seeds, and you will soon be back again." Before dawn, the next morning, Pa hitched a Pet and Patty to the wagon and loaded his furs into it and drove away. Laura and Mary counted the long, empty days. 1, 2, 3, 4. And still, Pa had not come home. In the morning of the 5th day, they began earnestly to watch for him. It was a sunny day. There was still a little chill in the wind, but it smelled of spring. The vast blue sky resounded in the quacks of wild ducks and the honk, honk, honking of wild geese. Do you know, I love the new vocabulary words we hear every day with this book. Vast, the vast blue sky, huge, enormous, everywhere. That's a wonderful word. And it resounded in the quacks of the wild ducks. So the sound of the ducks were all across the vast blue sky. Words are wonderful. The long black dotted lines of the geese were all flying north. Laura and Mary played outdoors in the wild, sweet weather. And poor Jack watched them, and he sighed. He couldn't run and play anymore because he was chained. Laura and Mary tried to comfort him, but he didn't want petting. He wanted to be free again. as he used to be. Pa didn't come that morning. He didn't come that afternoon. Ma said it must have taken him a long time to trade his furs. That afternoon, Laura and Mary were playing hopscotch. They marked the lines with a stick in the muddy yard. Mary really didn't want to hop. She was almost 8 years old, and she didn't think that hopscotch was a ladylike play. But Laura teased and coaxed and said that if they stayed outdoors, they would be sure to see Pa the minute he came from the creek bottoms. So Mary was hopping. Suddenly, she stopped on one foot and said, "What's that?" Laura had already heard the strange sound, and she was listening to it. She said, "It's the Indians." Mary's other foot stopped, and she stood still. Mary was scared. Laura was not exactly scared, but that sound made her feel funny. It was the sound of quite a lot of Indians with many voices. It was something like the sound of axe chopping and something like a dog barking, and it was something like a song. But not like any song Laura had ever heard. It was a fierce sound, but it didn't seem angry. Laura tried to hear it more clearly. She couldn't hear it very well because hills and trees and the wind were in the way, and Jack was growling. Ma came outdoors and listened a minute. Then she told Mary and Laura to come into the house. Ma took Jack inside too and pulled the latch string. They didn't play any more. They watched at the window and listened to that sound. It was harder to hear in the house. Sometimes they could hear it. Then they heard it again. And then they couldn't. But it hadn't stopped. Ma and Laura did the chores earlier than usual. They locked Bunny and the cow and the calf in the stable and took the milk to the house. Ma strained it and set it away. She drew a bucket of fresh water from the well, while Laura and Mary carried in wood. All the time, that sound went on. It was louder now, and it was faster. They all went into the house, and Ma pulled the latch string tight. They were all inside. They wouldn't go out of the house till morning. The sun slowly sank. All around the edge of the prairie, the edge of the sky flushed pink. Firelight flickered in the dusty house, and Ma was getting supper, but Laura and Mary silently watched from the window. They saw the colors fade from everything. The land was shadowy, and the sky was clear and pale gray. All the time, that sound came from the creek bottoms. It was louder and faster, and Laura's heart beat faster and louder. How she shouted when she heard the wagon. She ran to the door, jumped up and down, but she couldn't unbar the door. Ma wouldn't let her go out. Ma went out to help Pa bring in the bundles. He came in with his arms full, and Laura and Mary clung to his sleeves and jumped on his feet. Pa laughed his jolly big laugh. "Hey, hey, don't upset me," he laughed. "What do you think I am, a tree to climb?" He dropped the bundles on the table. He hugged Laura in a big bear hug and tossed her and hugged her again. Then he hugged Mary snugly on his other arm. "Listen, Pa," Laura said. listen to the Indians. They're making such a funny noise. And we'll find out what that noise is the next day. Thank you, boys and girls. Bye.